Okay, what I want to do is unify America with Black history. So a subject that you probably haven't thought about, and a subject that, you know, some might think is controversial. But we're in a time of really unprecedented division. This idea is you need to be more like me, and I need to be more like you. And so one of the things that we talk about is this idea that history, you know, separates. That Black history is separate from white history, is separate from other history. And so I founded first the Tennis Hall of Fame because to be a voice for the voiceless. I became president of the USTA, United States Tennis Association Eastern Section, and I learned that there were so many incredible Black players long before Venus and Serena who had been lost to the history books. They had no voice. There was a woman named Ora Washington who was not only the best Black tennis player, she was the best basketball player, yet nobody heard about it. So I started the Black Tennis Hall of Fame to do that, and actually called the International Tennis Hall of Fame when I was president, and really said we need to work together to do a history. And so we did a history called Breaking the Barriers. I also founded the Black Entrepreneurs Hall of Fame, which we'll talk about, the Black Inventors Hall of Fame, the Black Educators Hall of Fame, and the Black Executives Hall of Fame. And just recently, and hopefully Don's going to be part of it, I just started the Black Music Hall of Fame. And so why this history is important, you're going to learn some things today about some inventions and other things that you never knew came out of the Black community, which is just 13% of society. Many folks were suffering from slavery and other things, yet these incredible inventions are very, very important. So I show this because, again, there's divide. Now, some say, well, racism, we're in a post-racial period. There's no more racism. Some say there's racism everywhere. So we're going back and forth. And so one of the things that I like to say is that America is like a football team. These happen to be the number 2 and number 4 teams in the College Bowl playoffs. And if you look at the NFL, you look at college football, the successful teams have experts at every single position, which are very different. So in order to win the college championships or the Super Bowl, you have to have a great center and a great wide receiver and a great defensive back and a great quarterback and a great running back. It's all about Black excellence, Italian excellence, Korean excellence, Jewish excellence. And guess what? That makes us stronger. One of the reasons we have been the most successful country in the history of the world for many, many years is because of that diversity. And so when we begin to think about that, think about a football team. What we try to do when we try to eliminate this history, we're trying to make a football team of all Tom Brady's. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to erase this history instead of coming together. So part of what we want to do with the Black Halls of Fame is to really set the stage so that we can have Irish Halls of Fame and Italian Halls of Fame and Jewish Halls of Fame so that we can celebrate the diversity that really makes this country fantastic. So with that, one of the things I always start out, and I did a TED Talk years ago about this, I wrote a book on influence called Intelligent Influence. And the idea, and I was starting to write a book about leadership, and there are a million books on leadership, but I thought I had one of the best. And so what I discovered was I'm kind of an etymologist. I'm a word, as one of the other speakers, I like to study words. And I looked at the definitions of leadership, command, and authority. And I found the word influence in each one of those definitions. And so it really got me to think about this word influence and discovered that it's a word that's hidden in plain sight. If they'll say she's influential or he's influential, what does it mean? More social media followers, that you're more attractive or you're rich or you're powerful. Yet we take that for granted. Yet we do what we do, think the way we think, and accomplish what we accomplish because of influence. And the example that I use are English accents. That no child is born with an English accent. They can be born in London or Brooklyn or Sydney, Australia or Birmingham, Alabama, and they develop a very different English accent that often stays with them the rest of their life. So think about our favorite sports teams. Think about our culture, our religion, how we think, who we think is attractive. All those are part of the influence. So one of the things that I like to say is that I know what the best music in the world is. And often folks will say, what's the best music in the world? And we'll hear, jazz or hip hop or classical but the research shows that the best music in the world is the music you heard between ages 14 and 25. And it doesn't mean you don't like other stuff, but that's when your brain is developing and you're first falling in love. And that's how much we think. And so that has given me this idea of really understanding non-judgment. Like, I could now sit with someone who was a member of the Ku Klux Klan and say, well, why do you hate black people? Why do you hate Jewish people? They weren't born that way. They were influenced that way. And the good news is that we, as we're coming together as a country, we need to understand that we can be influenced to think differently if we spend time understanding the excellence of our communities. And that's the foundation of this idea of Black Halls of Fame. So just share some of my influences. And my dad is on the left here. He passed away in 2020 of cancer. A guy named Ralph Abernathy, who was Dr. King's right-hand guy, and Dr. King. And that was in Boston in '65 to do a march to integrate the Boston public schools. So here's my dad marching with Dr. King. And that's been the influence on me. That's why if Dr. King were here, he would talk about how do we bring people together? You know, how do we kind of move beyond this idea of separation and really come together as a people in a country? So as I said earlier, I became the first black president of the United States Tennis Association Eastern Section, which is tennis in all of New York and northern New Jersey. And when I became president, one of the things my dad always said is that if you are able to have a position of influence, use that to make a difference. So I called up the Tennis Hall of Fame and said, you know, baseball's done some things with the Negro Leagues. It'd be great to do an exhibit on, there's an association called the American Tennis Association, where blacks weren't allowed to play in the white tennis world, so they started their own tournament. They let white players play, but they couldn't play in those tournaments. And so we did an exhibit on that, and 25,000 people saw that in the 2007 US Open. And the success of that really convinced me to say, we need to do more. That one exhibit is enough, so I started the Black Tennis Hall of Fame, which has exceeded my expectations. And on the pic, my brother drew that. There's Dr. Johnson was a coach of Althea Gibson and Arthur Ashe. Some of those names that you may have heard of. But what it did is really open my eyes to the ubiquitousness of these halls of fame. And so in the exhibit, when we were at the US Open, a number of white kids who were tennis players saw some of the things that the black players went through. And many of them and parents were tearing up and said, you know, I'm complaining about line calls. Look at what I had to go through. And it really showed that this Hall of Fame, instead of separating, really opens people's eyes to some of the opportunities. So this is a story that I want, the gentleman who's the screenwriter isn't here, but I want to do a story about. There's a guy named Don Budge on the left and Jimmy McDaniel on the right. So Don Budge was the first to win something called the Grand Slam in tennis. He won all 4 of the major tournaments. Black players weren't allowed to play, so he knew he was the best white player in the world without question. So in many ways, this story is certainly as significant as the Jackie Robinson story 8 years before. But one of the things about tennis is that if, in fact, Jimmy McDaniel, and he lost, you know, a close match, and Don Budge said Jimmy McDaniel was one of the top 10 players in the world. But if he had beaten him, that not only was a barrier of race, but a barrier of class. Tennis was the highest level class. The other thing that people don't realize is Althea Gibson, who won Wimbledon and it was a U.S. Nationals back when she won, got a ticker tape parade in New York City in 1957. That's one of the wonderful stories that people don't know about. So then we go to the Black Entrepreneurs Hall of Fame and the Black Inventors Hall of Fame. And so we had so it was 2007 when I founded the Black Tennis Hall of Fame. And 2019 and 2020, I founded the Black Entrepreneurs first and the Black Inventors. And we wanted to have our inaugural induction ceremony in May of last year in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So many of you have heard about the race massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And one of the reasons I'm so excited about entrepreneurship is that people don't realize that that was a time when the Supreme Court said segregation is the law of the land. And so the black community in Tulsa, Oklahoma became the wealthiest black community in the country because of entrepreneurship. And so that community was so wealthy that 6 of the families had their own planes in the midst of segregation. And so I see entrepreneurship as a hope to really transform some of the communities in America that are struggling. So we decided to do it there. And this is the Greenwood, it's called the Greenwood section, and some people call it Black Wall Street. And so our induction ceremony First, had something called a gentleman, J.B. Stratford, a guy named John Rogers, who founded the first black mutual fund, was his great-grandson. And so we celebrated him because the Stratford Hotel was one of the most successful businesses there. That was amazing. Albert White was there representing something called Network Solutions. So I'm going to say some things that you would never know. So Network Solutions was the first company in America to hand out web addresses. A black-owned company. They were the first to give you the .coms. People don't realize that. Then they were sold to another larger public company, the Black Inventors Hall of Fame. Gladys Mae West did the calculations for the GPS. We had Mark Dean, who was a co-inventor of the IBM PC. Black man. Dr. Patricia Bath got a patent for laser cataract surgery. Dr. Lonnie Johnson, who was there, who is a real rocket scientist, did the Super Soaker water gun. And I'm sure many of you have played with that. And he was actually inducted both the inventors and the entrepreneurs. This is the trophy that we had for those halls of fame. And it was a mixed crowd and really a celebratory opportunity. So the Black Educators Hall of Fame. So there's a gentleman by the name of Alexander Twilight. And so I started an after-school program called the Twilight After School Program that people thought was based on the time, but it really was based on the first black person to graduate from college, Middlebury College. Now it's hard, I went to Princeton undergrad, hard for me to talk about Harvard, but Harvard was the first school to graduate, 1642. So it took 181 years for a black person to graduate from college. See, this is important history for us to begin to think about. The second was the first black president. Martin Henry Freeman became the first black president of college. Again, this is history that should be taught in every school. It's important. The Black Executives Hall of Fame. So again, Clifton Wharton was the first CEO of a major company in the United States. It wasn't Fortune 500 at the time, it is now. And so at the time, Franklin Raines, who was involved in government as well, was the CEO of Fannie Mae, so he became the first black CEO of Fortune 500 companies. You know, these are things we need to think about and understand why and understand the excellence, but begin to ask the question. So this is a group of some of the folks that I had appointed as executive. James Howard, who was a big guy when I founded the Black Inventors Hall of Fame. There's no one better. James Howard, who at some point will speak here, has 18 patents of his own and has done wonders with the Black Inventors Hall of Fame. So here's some additional black history that you may not have thought about. So VJ Records, how many people knew that the Beatles signed with a black company when they first came to America? So Sarah Boone, the ironing board. Mary Van Britten Brown, the home security system. Garrett Morgan, in addition to gas masks, the 3 light traffic signals. So there is really virtually nothing you can do where you're not touching black history in some way. Frederick McKinley Jones, refrigerated trucks. And so it's important to really understand and accept. And the beauty of this is there's been so much excellence in America. It's not about making people feel bad. Influences, it's influence. I said, someone who was in the Klan was not born racist. People who think that whites are better than blacks are influenced to think that. And so that's why this is even more important. If we're going to continue to grow as a country, we need to really understand the excellence that comes from all sorts of different communities in America instead of whitewashing the history. That has to be a fundamental activity. Alexander Miles, the automatic elevator doors. James E. West, the electric microphone. Introducing this. George Grant, the golf tee. James on LinkedIn, James Howard, the executive director of the Black Inventors Hall of Fame, has done these little clips on LinkedIn. So if you look him up, so he did one with the golf tee. He teed off and said, that an African American invented the golf tee. So then the Lewis Latimer, people may know, carbon light bulb filament. Again, working with Alexander Grant, working with Thomas Edison to do that, to really improve on that. Thomas Edison started it, but he improved on it. Mark Dean, the color IBM PC monitor, as we talked about. Elijah McCoy, you've heard the term the real McCoy. He had about 60 different inventions, but one of them was the lawn sprinkler. Alice H. Parker, the natural gas central heating.
From Morristown.
From Morristown, I didn't know that. George T. Santon, the clothes dryer. Charles Drew, the blood bank. George Crumb, the potato chips. So the idea is, there's Italian excellence and there's Irish excellence. I want to know. I want to understand. But if we as a country, we've got to resist the idea of separation. I don't like you because you're a liberal. I don't like you because you're conservative. I don't like you because you're this religion or that religion. We have to begin, and one way to do that is by celebrating excellence. And one of the things that I will say, because of influence, if Dennis Haysbert and Morgan Freeman had not played black presidents, there would probably not be a Barack Obama because of influence. Because people saw that and said, I can see that. I can see a black president. It's not so weird. Unfortunately, we've not had as many strong women presidents in movies and other things to influence people to say, yeah, that can work. And we don't understand how much influence dictates every single thing we do and think. And so one of my goals today is to get you to influence you to think about Black history in America, your own history, and how we can start to come together and work together. So anyway, I was saying Barack Obama was elected, so that having a black president after slavery and all of the horrible things that have happened. So we're storming. There's a lot of the chaos now is directly related to the election of Barack Obama. But I am optimistic that we are going to start norming. I think people are tired of this hate and chaos, and we're going to start norming, and we're going to perform as a country. And I really believe, which is why I'm doubling down on entrepreneurship, is going to be the foundation of where we go as a country. So with that, I hope I got you to think a little differently. That's my goal. I hope you to think about your own influences and think about Black history, but also your own history. And don't be bashful in sharing it. So thank you all very much.